Good evening. Good evening. Welcome back to Let's Talk with Casey and Mike. We have a very interesting show tonight. As you can see, Michael is not here. He is on vacation with his family and they're enjoying themselves. So he'll be back next week. Mike, enjoy yourself. Y'all have a blast. Glad you got time to get away. But we certainly have someone special here tonight that will be able to enlighten us on some things concerning the Carmelo Anthony trial and answer questions and comments from anybody that may have them. Joining us tonight, good friend of ours. If you haven't seen her on our podcast, go to our YouTube channel. Let's Talk Casey Mike. Just Let's Talk Casey Mike on our YouTube channel, and just go back and you'll see Talk with Alicia McDonald. So tonight we have uh, Alicia McDonald, who is family lawyer, and she has a wealth of knowledge, one of the best at it. And if you need her, we're going to drop the information later. So presenting to some and bringing back for others tonight, Miss Alicia McDonald. How you doing, sis?
Hello, Casey. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. Um, of course, when I spoke to you, we wanted to bring forth the layout and all of the fallout from the Carmelo Anthony trial and the verdict. I know a lot of people may not have followed it, but if you can, for those who haven't followed it closely, if you can just give a brief breakdown of what took place and what the trial was concerning.
Okay, and let me just preface this by saying that I am a criminal defense attorney. I do family law and criminal defense, and I used to be a prosecutor in the state of Florida as well. It's important to remember that different states have different laws. Okay,
Right.
so some of what I may be saying to you may not be exactly applicable to the case because Texas has different laws, and you would have to be a licensed attorney in Texas to, that practices criminal
Right.
defense to know specifically what's happening in Texas. But generally, the law as applied works the same. Okay.
Mm.
So there are a lot of inconsistent facts about the case. And then basically, until they release and open up the trial transcripts and release the videos, which are right now sealed, we won't really know everything that happened. Everything is going to be filtered through a third party because
Mm.
we weren't in the courtroom. The court issued a gag order discussing the case before the trial, and then after the trial, almost the same day or the next day, they sealed the they seal the record. Normally, you can go on the clerk of court in any county and get documents that are a part of the public record laws. I know Florida has very broad Sunshine State public record laws. Texas apparently does not, because I went to try to review it, to prepare a little bit more for it today, and it was already sealed the day after.
Mm.
That almost the day 48 within 48 hours after the trial. But
Wow.
in general, you had Carmelo Anthony, apparently a very bright young man, never been in any trouble, two-parent home, African American, that was on the track team, 17 years of age, who had been having some difficulties at the school with bullying from more than one, but basically two twin brothers, Austin Metcalf and his brother. So I'll just call them the Metcalf brothers. Okay, he had had some bullying, some problems. Apparently, the Metcalf brothers are a little bit of a handful in the little Collier County, Texas town where they live. And on this particular day, they were at a track meet. There was a tent at the track meet. It's very common for people who run and play tracks. They put up the tent
Right.
for shelter for the athletes and families and things like that. Um, there are some conflicting information, but it appears that he was invited over to be under tent with a friend. It was a mutual friend of his, and also he apparently was friends with the Metcalf twins as well.
Mhm.
Uh, at some point while he was under that tent, he was confronted by the Metcalf brothers' father and told to leave the tent. I guess there was, some banter, some arguing going back and forth, because remember they have a history with each other. And the
Right.
father told him to leave. For whatever reason, we don't know how many times. There's mixed accounts. Some people say it was several times. Some people say it was a couple times. But for whatever reason, he was asked to leave from under the tent, and he chose not to do that. He had a right to be there. It doesn't look like he was doing anything that is inappropriate. I know there's been a lot of, well, why didn't he just leave? I don't know why he didn't leave. He may have had a reason why he didn't leave, but it doesn't look like he needed to leave. It doesn't look like he was violating any rules or anything by choosing to remain there.
Mhm.
Um, and then eventually there was some words exchanged with the Metcalf brothers, and Austin Metcalf, along with his brother and some other boys, kind of confronted Carmelo. There's been further conflicting testimony. There are some people that have said that, you know, Austin Metcalf was making statements or saying, like, if you don't leave, I'm gonna make you leave. And Carmelo Anthony was like, touch me, and you're gonna find out. Put your hands on me,
Mhm.
and you're gonna see. Other people are saying that never happened. We don't know yet. Okay. Apparently, there's a video that captured a majority of what happened under that tent. That has not been released. It was, part of the gag order. I don't know if they showed it at the trial. Again, we were not allowed in the courtroom. The media wasn't for a great extent. So we'll find out in time. But at the end of the day, there was a fight. Um, and Carmelo Anthony had on him what is to be considered a pocket knife. Now, there's a lot of conflict about that. Was it a pocket knife? Was it a tool that he used to clean his cleats that, looked like a knife? And, all of these things. But I want to make something clear that's the law everywhere, including Texas and Florida. A weapon, if used in a way to produce harm or death, is still a weapon. Okay, so you can use an ink pen. If you take the ink pen, which is normally used to write papers, but you stab me in my neck, it's a weapon. Okay,
Right.
um, so
Right.
essentially, it was a weapon. It was deemed to be a weapon. Again, there doesn't seem to be any reason why he couldn't have had it on him. If it was a pocket knife, you're allowed to have a pocket knife. You're allowed to have a gun on you if you wanted to.
True.
I mean, it doesn't look like he was violating any rules. But at some point during this altercation and fight, Carmelo Anthony said that he was afraid for his safety, that he feared for his life, and in self-defense, um, he stabbed Austin Metcalf, and Austin Metcalf ended up bleeding out and dying at the scene. Um, they later on charged him with premeditated first degree murder, um, and he was subsequently convicted. So that's what happened last week, and that's why everyone has been in such uproar, that he was found guilty when he was only defending. When he was defending himself is one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is, you planned it, you prepared it, you knew, basically you were afraid of these boys. They've been bothering you in the past, and so you strapped
Mhm.
up. You had a weapon, and you was waiting for them to start something so you can, stab them. So there
Yeah.
are two different equations, two different versions of the story. Um, but it's important to understand this as well. And these are the two things that I think are being missed in this discussion. The jury is the trier of fact. So I can have my version of the story. You
Right.
can have your version of the story. We put it all out there in front of a jury, and the jury decides which version or versions of the story they accept as truth. They decide the facts. Sometimes a jury will believe everything the state says and nothing the defense says. Sometimes the jury will
Hmm.
believe everything the defense says and nothing the state says. Sometimes they'll believe a little bit of both. But the
Yeah.
jury decides the facts. So it seemed very clear that the jury accepted the state's version of the facts. They came back in less than, I think, 3 hours, um, for a guilty verdict on the first degree premeditated murder. In the law, we call that an acquittal. When the
Hmm.
jury comes back that fast on a major
Right.
crime case, we call it an acquittal. We're like, oh, acquitted.
It's good
The
enough.
fact that
Yeah.
they came back that fast guilty,
Right.
they 100% believed the state's version of the facts. And um, like I said, they're the trier of facts.
Right.
And he was subsequently found guilty of premeditated murder and sentenced to 35 years in prison. He was tried as an adult. I think he's eligible for parole in Texas in about 17 years.
Mm.
Um, so he's looking at a very lengthy sentence right now at this time. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was an appeal, because people are like, you have to understand that you don't get to just appeal a verdict you don't like. That's not how
Right.
it works.
Right.
You have to preserve, issues have to be preserved to be appealed. Okay, fundamental constitutional errors, or your attorney objected to something that was allowed, and the judge let it in, and now you get to appeal that, that decision, that verdict. You know, the judge's ruling on that evidentiary issue could have changed the outcome of the trial, and so you appeal that issue, and the higher court decides. But appeals are always a shot in the dark.
Hmm.
The time to fight on a case is when the case is happening. On appeal, it's a dime a dozen. They're very hard to win. Very hard to win. So he's climbing uphill. He's always been climbing uphill, based on the demographics of that county and everything that's been happening. But he's really climbing uphill on an appeal. Um, Also, if things weren't preserved, you can't appeal them. So if for some reason, for example, the judge says something you dislike, or the judge rules against you, and or something, and you don't object to it, the state gets ready to put in a picture that you feel should not be put in, and you don't object and say that picture should not come in, it's prejudicial, blah blah blah, you don't give an objection to it, then you can't appeal it later on and say, you know what, they shouldn't have put that picture on my client.
Hmm.
If you didn't
Right.
object to it and preserve it as an issue. And see, that's the key here, that none of us know, because we weren't allowed in that courtroom. So we don't know if there are things that should not have occurred but were objected to and can be appealed. It could have been a lot of things that should not have happened in that courtroom that you're not going to be able to appeal because they weren't preserved. We don't
Right.
know.
Right.
The glaring thing that everyone is saying is a big problem is that there was an all white jury. Um, but that's actually not true. It wasn't an all-white jury. It just were no black members on the jury. It was
Okay.
a diversified jury. It just was not diversified with African American people, um, which the argument is you're entitled to a jury of your peers. That also is a misunderstanding in the law. You are not entitled to a jury that looks like you.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
are entitled to a jury of civilians, citizens, that have gone through the vetting process, that
Right.
represent a cross section of the demographic where you live.
Right.
There were apparently um, black people on the jury panel,
Okay.
that were struck. I think three of them were on the panel, and they were struck for various reasons, um, all of which amounted to statements that they said, um, that the state or the defense felt that they could not be fair and impartial. You have to
Mm.
be, when you are questioned in jury selection, the only reason, because they can't get into the facts of the case. I mean, even though you might live in a community where you heard the facts, they can't really argue the case. That's not the time to argue the
Right.
case. So they can't get into the nitty gritty details of the case. They just have to assure that you are going to be fair and impartial. You're going to come in with an open mind and you're going to make your decision based on the evidence, not feeling sorry for someone, not because you're influenced by the media, not because of race, not because of gender, but based on the facts and the law alone. And remember, the
Mhm.
jury decides the facts and then they apply it to the law that is instructed and given to them by the court. So it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
It's gonna be hard. I mean, like again, we haven't read the transcript, so we don't know what question was specifically asked and how they answered it. Any criminal defense attorney is gonna try to rehabilitate a juror, you know, try to get them on the jury. But you
Hmm.
have strikes to strike jurors that are peremptory, and you have strikes that are for cause. And a peremptory strike is I just don't want them on there.
Right.
I just don't want them on there. And
Yeah.
you can use a peremptory strike on anybody for any reason. However, if that person falls within a protected class, such as African American people,
Hmm.
based on the disparity, and the limited number of jurors that are African American, and your defendant is African American, um, the court's going to take that very carefully because they don't want it to come back on appeal. Okay, so they're going to ask questions. And if you say things like, I can't send a black man to prison,
Hmm.
before you've even heard any of the evidence, you've already made a decision. I can't be fair and impartial. I don't want to be on this jury. I don't want to sit in judgment of another. I don't law enforcement, anything they say, I'm not listening to them. Anything that may disqualify you is gonna work. My understanding from what I've kind of read on the blogs and heard from some attorneys that I do respect, out in the social media world, influencers, it appears that they said things that could validly have them disqualified.
Disqualify you.
Yeah, from a jury. Again, we'll find out when we see all the transcripts. But if that's the case, what happens is uh, the state moves to strike a juror peremptory. The defense then must preserve it by objecting. Then the judge requires the state to give a race neutral reason. It's called a Batson challenge. It comes from a case.
Mhm.
But requires them to give them a race neutral, or a reason that juror is being struck that has nothing to do with their race.
Right.
And if they give that reason and it satisfies the court, they're
That's it.
off. It has nothing to do with race. And
So talk about why it's important. A lot of people in our culture, the moment we see that letter, we try to get out of it. We don't want to go to jury duty. We'll do anything not to go to jury duty, or we just try to get disqualified just because some people look at it as a waste of time. But something like this is very important to be there to have the opportunity to be chosen, so that you can be someone that is able to digest and go through all the facts and be there for one of your peers.
yes, I've picked hundreds of juries, and I can tell you from personal experience, it is very hard to get black people to remain on the jury.
Right.
Based on some of it, I think it's just they don't want to be on jury duty, so they just say all kind of crazy stuff because they know they're gonna get kicked off.
Right.
Some of it is financial. A lot of times when you're on the jury and you get paid by
To
the
miss work.
hour,
Yeah.
you miss work and that money is not made up, and you have to take care of your family.
Right.
Um, but really and truly, if you're called for jury duty, you should do everything in your power to be on a jury truthfully. So no one should get on a jury because they want to free somebody or they
Right.
don't
Right.
like another side. That
Right.
I would never advocate for that for anybody, black or white.
Exactly.
You should get on. You should tell the truth, and uh, and if selected, you should serve on a jury, and you should do your job, which is be fair and impartial and listen to the evidence and make
Absolutely.
a decision based on that and that alone. Why it is important, and I'll give you a perfect example. There are experiences that we as African American people have that other people may not have. And what I mean
Mhm.
by that is I'll give you a perfect example. I had a case once where The defendant said that he was just walking down the street and the cop just pulled him over, just pulled up on him, jumped out of the car, and the officer said, "Where are you going, boy?" Now, the people in the jury thought that was ridiculous. They were like, "Who does that?"
Hmm.
Officers
Hmm.
just don't jump out of the car and ask people where they're
Yeah.
going. Yeah, they
Yeah.
don't in your neighborhood. But
Right.
see,
Right.
we know as African American people that happens every day.
All the time. Right.
So we wouldn't automatically discredit what the defendant was saying right there. You see what I'm saying? We need to hear
Hmm.
more information because that is quite plausible. I had another case one time where the woman was accused of a DUI and the officer said that she was swerving. But when he pulled her over, she had a little makeup bag in her lap. And she
Hmm.
said, "I was putting on eyeliner while I was driving." And the officer thought that was absolutely ridiculous. Who would do that? Uh, 95% of women put on makeup
Right.
while they're driving and in a hurry. You see what I'm
Right.
saying? That
Yeah.
that that that's the human element of a jury. There are experiences that we all share that allow us to have a better understanding and how to apply facts in a situation. That's that's why it's important that we serve on juries when we're qualified to do so, because we just have experiences, all of us, different experiences. And it works the other way around. I tell people all the time, I would not be a good juror for a case that involved elderly abuse. My
Hmm.
grandmother stayed with me with Alzheimer's. I took care of her, and I'm if I hear certain things, I'm gonna be like,
Yeah.
nah,
Yeah.
nah,
Yeah.
not my granny. That's not happening.
Right.
So I
Right.
wouldn't be a good person for that jury, and that's
Absolutely.
okay. That's okay. I'm not telling anyone not to tell the truth when they get on a jury panel. I'm just saying don't make up things and say things just to get off of a jury, because you really need to serve. If it's a civic duty, and if you're qualified and called to serve, please do.
And the options for the jury was acquittal, manslaughter, and murder.
Right. The state attorney always charges the highest offense.
Right.
And
Right.
then the jury can come back on what's known as lesser included offenses. The
Hmm.
jury can come back and say, you know what? It's like a ladder. To get all the way to the top, we got to have premeditated murder. But you're like, you know what? I don't think that there was premeditation here, but I do think that he killed them. So I'm going to drop it down to a manslaughter.
Hmm.
I don't think it was, I think it was an accident. I don't think it was blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to drop it down from a voluntary manslaughter down to an involuntary manslaughter.
Hmm.
A self defense argument, of course, is a complete defense of the crime. And the jury would have come back not guilty had they accepted the self defense argument.
Wow. Wow. It's a hard pill to swallow, like you said, because these type of things, not that trial, but the stops and just driving while black, walking while black, those things are still real today. I know we talked about some time back when we were in high school, and I know you recollected that event where we were pulled over, me and some friends, and we were taken out of the car, 15, 16 police with their semi-automatics in our faces. We're 15, 16, and 17 years old. And those things, if you act a certain way, if you respond a certain way, not many people are taught how to handle that situation. And we fast forward to 2026, and these things are still taking place. They're still happening. I did have a friend that talked to some black youth about what to do when you're stopped. It just randomly stopped. Of course, there are people breaking the law of every color and creed every day. You're
Facts.
breaking the law, you deserve to get ticketed, arrested, whatever. But there are a lot of people that are not breaking the law, that are not doing anything. They just living life, and some police or some bystander, because of their lack of compassion or their hate for a certain race, they want to accuse them or charge them with something. As an attorney, what is something Alicia, that you would tell people when we're faced with a stoppage for no reason, for no
I would.
reason at all?
Well, I definitely used to be a youth leader in my church and have young people that would get stopped and things like that. And one thing I would encourage them to do, especially young men, young black men, is take your driver's license picture with a tie. Take your driver's license
Mm,
picture with a tie or a suit, so that when that officer pulls up that license and looks at that license, if on that particular day you just came from the basketball court, or on that particular
mhm.
day you just came from working out, um, there'll be a pause. You'll look at that driver's license and be like, there's something different here. Okay.
Right.
Um, and then I would always encourage people to be polite. Be respectful, as you would with any adult. Just be respectful. Now you ain't gotta lick nobody boots because you ain't no slave out
Right.
here. But be respectful. You don't have to, as soon as somebody come outside cursing them out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But we have to understand that we can do it all right and still end up
And
not going
still,
home.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So I'm only telling you things to try to help you get home. But you can still do all these things and still not be home. And that
Right.
is the bottom line in the problem. Because most officers are paramilitary trained. They came from the military. They're suffering from PSD. They're hostile. They've come from combative environments, and they treat their job as law enforcement as as if they're combatants. They're
Right.
heavily armed. They wear bulletproof vests. They roll up as if they're the SWAT team, all the time. We have a situation right now that's going on in the country with a 1 year old that was just shot in a car and killed for an alleged shoplifting. That's happening right now.
A
Uh,
1 year old?
a 1 year old. There's a case. Last name is Riley. A 1 year old little boy. His mother and another person are alleged to have stolen some diapers from Walmart. Of course, there's disputed information that they didn't steal anything, but they were alleged to have stole something. They went in their car and they were driving off. The officer says that they were driving towards him in a safety measure after chasing them out of the store. He pulled a gun and shot several times, killing the 1 year old that was sitting in the mother's lap and severely shooting and injuring the driver and the other person that was in the car. Listen, I don't care if she was stealing a $2,000 TV. There's nothing in Walmart that is
Nothing.
worth shooting somebody. I have
Nothing.
been a prosecutor and a defense attorney, and Walmart has a camera on every register, every self checkout, every aisle, every light post in the parking lot,
Yeah.
every entrance and exit. There are more cameras in a Walmart than in an airport, or
Absolutely.
probably the Pentagon. I mean, it's insane. So
Yeah.
you had their picture, you had their car, you had their tag, you had all of that. If you thought that they were really stealing something, then turn that information over for an investigation.
Right.
But
Right.
there's no reason to start shooting based on somebody allegedly taking a box of diapers. That
Yeah.
I just can't even fathom that. And Ben Crump has one of the best civil rights attorneys in the country.
Hmm.
Is now on the case. A lot of people say that too about Carmelo Anthony. They say, well, why didn't Ben Crump? Bro, Ben Crump is a civil rights attorney, not a
Yeah. It's
criminal defense
different.
attorney. It's
Right.
different.
Totally different.
So
Yeah.
totally different. And he's on it because he knows immediately Walmart is liable and the police department is liable. The question will
Absolutely.
become whether or not the officer should be criminally punished
Right.
once we look at that video. Because we've heard
Wow.
this before. The car was aimed at me. They were coming at me, and then you get the video and you see the officer stepped out in front of the car and
Yeah.
started shooting. So we've been here before many times,
Many times. Many
many
times. There's
times.
so many. There's so many more cases that we can talk about, and I know
But it's been
time is of
3 weeks. In
Yeah.
3 weeks, we got a
Yeah.
child. We got
Shot in the back.
a not guilty verdict for a child that was alleged to
Yeah.
have a bottle of water shot in the back.
Right. Right.
We got a 35-year sentence on a 17-year-old that had been bullied and attacked,
Yeah.
allegedly, and then we have a 1-year-old shot and killed for allegedly a shoplifting theft at a Walmart. I mean, what is
Yeah,
what is going on? Our children are just not safe out here, and even here locally. Locally in the news, Gainesville High School, they just arrested someone who came to
yeah,
campus with a gun.
with a
I mean,
gun. I read that.
please, please, y'all, please stop touching
Yeah,
guns.
yeah.
Stop touching
Stay in
guns.
your kids' business. Again, thank
Deep
you
in it.
all for joining us with Let's Talk with Casey and Mike. Alicia, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to drop your information in the chat for people to be able to see and look you up at any time for any
No
needs that,
problem.
and hopefully you'll be able to help those out. But again, families who are ever looking, fathers, mothers, older brothers, sisters, stay in your family's business. Be able to help them and not allow them to just go out into this world blindly, not knowing how to handle these situations appropriately. Alicia, thank you again. We appreciate you. Everybody, love you, and thank you for joining. Let's talk with Casey and Mike. Peace.
Thank you, brother. Take care.
Yes.